with Leader's Edge,
where
learning is a never-ending
journey, limitless vistas. Good day. Welcome to the Leader's Edge. And today is season 9, episode 8. And our guest is somebody who is such a bubbly person, so effervescent and expressive. Her name is Rosario Calixto Chavez, Chito to her friends, who's going to be talking to us about the making of a leader. So let's welcome her to the virtual stage. Chito?
Thank you very much. And before I introduce myself, please allow me to thank the people behind this Leader's Edge for this distinct privilege of being featured in episode number 8 of season 9, entitled The Making of a Leader. The Making of a Leader is actually my leadership story, and I hope that with this episode, I will be able to inspire people, especially the youth.
Mm.
There are actually different views about leaders, Dino. Some say that leaders are born, others say that they aren't born, but they are made.
Mm.
And just like anything else, through hard work. However, recent scientific studies suggest that leadership is 30% genetic and 70% learned, and which I was actually able to validate through my own story.
Mm. Let me interrupt briefly. Because you raised a very important point. No? You're saying that part of it is genetics, part of it is a personal decision. When did you realize that you wanted to lead? Like, were you a young child who didn't like other people sort of like telling you what to do? Or did you realize that you wanted to take charge? I mean, how young were you when you discovered you had that desire to be in charge?
Wow, that's a very good question. In fact, I would say that even when I was as young as when I was in kindergarten, I graduated valedictorian in kindergarten, and I come from a family of achievers. Everybody
Okay.
became editor in chief of the declaimers and all those sort. But
Mhm.
I felt I was really different from my siblings because I wasn't happy about excelling in class because of memorizing things, like even claiming I could memorize, for example, this morning for a contest which will happen in the afternoon.
Cool.
I had that photographic memory, but I wasn't very happy
Mm.
because I knew that there was something lacking in me. I could not, because this school was a parochial school run by nuns and priests,
Okay.
and
All right.
they didn't want people to express themselves. There's no freedom of speech. We're not allowed to say anything, give our ideas, our views. And
Mhm.
this was exactly what I felt I didn't want, because in this system. So I said I would want to be able to speak extemporaneously,
Mm.
and not to just say things from memory.
Mm. So that connects very well with the fact that Chito here is a lawyer. She is a licensed real estate broker, and she is a financial and investment consultant and a law professor to boot. She's also a civic leader and the former vice president and trust compliance of HSBC, okay, which is a bank. So I can see how even when you were still a young child in kindergarten, exposed to people who were so strict and maybe dogmatic, but you wanted to ask questions, you wanted to explore ideas, and yet you were told that it's just this particular version of it or that particular version of that, something inside you must have rebelled against that. You probably wanted to pursue the truth. You probably wanted to be able to determine your way. So it started at kindergarten. Did it grow? Did the yearning grow as you also grew older? Like what happened to you when you reached high school? And what led to that decision to take up law?
Okay. So actually, when I was in elementary, of course, I excelled academically, and this led to my being granted a full year scholarship in high school.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I had to, compete with other students from elementary.
Mm.
And it was something which was deliberated upon by a management committee from the nuns and the priests. So they gave me a full scholarship. And at that time, my family is such that my father was just working for the Arenetas and just a civil engineer, and we were seven all in all, and we could he could hardly actually afford to send seven siblings. I mean, our seven siblings to school, and the story about it is that my mother actually came from a very affluent family. She
Oh.
gave up this affluence, and she became my role model. And she sacrificed a lot. And, from a person who's the only girl in the family, or,
Mm.
they all went, like my grandfather went to Harvard, my, my, my,
Wow.
my, my uncle, from my mother's side, went to the
Mm.
Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and
Mm.
my mom. When they were talking about their achievements in school, my mom was the brightest.
Mm.
She actually studied in St. Teresa's and went to UP for medicine, straight
Okay.
A. And but the thing was, you know, she was in a kind of environment that my grandfather actually was very strict, didn't
Mm.
want her to go out, but she had everything. She was pampered with everything, like she would play the piano. So, and then because of that, when she eloped and she decided to,
Oh.
she finished at the time that was at the time of the war. And I was
Mm.
told that my grandfather, my father was able to court him because my grandfather was actually, a cousin of of basically my father was a cousin of the father. Oh, sorry, of the uncle. You know, somehow we had two relations there. The
All right.
anyway, to cut the story short, was my father was able to court my mother because of the fact that he was allowed to enter the house because of relations with the uncle, you know.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so when my mother was raising us, I could see the sacrifices she was washing. She was washing the dishes. She was, ironing the clothes. And my boy, if you'll see her face, she's like an actress. She's so beautiful, and she gave them all up to the point that my grandfather was asking her to give up the family, and she would be sent to Spain to continue her studies in medicine. So this was the reason why maybe I had that kind of drive. I
Mm.
wanted to put back my mom where she came from.
Mm.
So that was my ambition from when I was a child. That was why I wanted to really study hard and to come up with a very good life for my mother.
That is a wonderful story that you've shared because sometimes the common thread or pattern that we hear among our guests talk about things like they lost their dad when they were young, or they had to struggle so much because they didn't have too much to begin with. But in your case, it's wonderfully refreshing because you're talking about how you saw your mother as a role model, and especially how it's so clear that you admire her because she had a very strong streak of independence, which allowed her to make a very difficult decision to marry the one she loved. And as a result, you were born. And my question now becomes, so you saw a role model beckon to you, as though this is something I also want to become. Apart from your mom, was there anyone else who, for example, encouraged you to take up law? Because common wisdom would say, for example, like in the case of my own mother, my grandfather, her dad, was a lawyer, Epifanio Hermosissima Senior. Um, and so she wanted to follow in her dad's footsteps. She also wanted to become a lawyer. And then my grandfather said the last thing he should have said to anybody like my mom. He said, no, no, no. Women don't become lawyers. No, no, no. You're not going to. uh, and because he pretty much told her what she couldn't do, which was the wrong thing to say, because then she became very determined. Um, Later on in life, she decided to take many leadership roles. But in your case, it's different because it wasn't like you were told you can't do this or you can't take that, but that somebody paved the way for you. You were able to stand on the shoulder of a giant in your family, and you obviously got inspired. Um, but again, the question becomes, why law? Why not medicine? Like your mom.
Okay, it's a long story. Actually, it really started as my ambition was really to become a doctor at first because I
Mm,
wanted to be like my mom. As I said, she was my role model. So, but the thing was that from the start, I could sense already something like like I wanted, in a way, I had the makings of a politician in a way because going back to where when I was young, because we live in a modest place in Paco and Malate,
mm,
about a block away would be, of course, you cannot avoid, there are squatter
yeah,
areas.
yeah.
And my mom, to avoid us to be influenced, she felt that being with those children will influence us. She made sure that we were just staying at home.
Mm,
She would give us all the things that we would learn. She taught us Scrabble and everything. It would everything was a family affair. Like we would it was such a good family. But somehow I was really different. Like I would manage to go out and play with those street children.
mm.
And you would notice really the difference because I was, call it a rebel or something, because I was
Mm,
with, my mom would make us all stay at home, but I managed to go out. And
mm,
she would really be so mad because she would see me playing with those street children. You can see very well the difference because they were all in tattered clothes. I was wearing, the usual nice dress with that ribbon, the normal ribbon at the time, and shoes and socks.
mm,
So you'll never catch me wearing some because my mom somehow gave us that kind of, because she came from an affluent family. So even if we were not affluent, we carried everything that she was used to. So we were going when we go out, we have to be in nice clothes and
mm,
everything like that. So that was how we were brought up. We don't use other people's glass. We drink from our own, those things that she was used to when she was growing up. We also inherited that. So somehow, even if we were not really that rich, we got the kind of upbringing that my mom had when she was with her own family. And so that was how I was brought up. And I sort of became very independent at that age. In fact, I told you about the scholarship. Second year, I told my parents, I'm going to give up this scholarship. And
Oh,
because my aunt was actually the principal of Philippine Women's University,
my
I said
goodness.
I'm going to women's instead.
Hmm.
And that decision was actually supported by my parents.
Okay.
Considering the fact that we could hardly meet both ends, and they gave me that freedom to choose and to give up
Hmm.
that scholarship. And so I went
Hmm.
to PWU, and
Hmm.
because I felt that PWU was the answer, because I would sometimes attend some activities because my aunt was the principal, and I was so amazed how the students can actually do interpretative reading,
Hmm.
and then extemporaneous speeches, and at that kind of age. And so I said I wanted to be like that. So
Hmm.
I decided to give up the scholarship and went to women's.
So let's pause briefly and let's review the nuggets that you've shared with us. Like one, it seems that in the making of a leader, independent thought is critical. In other words, the ability to make your own choices, the ability to make your own decisions is critical. Um, I'd also like to add now, based on your sharing, that it seems your decision to play with others, especially those less fortunate, may have given you something more than a school education would have given. That could have been street smarts, that could have been the ability to get along with any kind of person. And so, though you were forbidden to go out there and play with them, I think you learned a lot from those experiences. And it's, would you agree, it's shaped you into who you are today? This capacity to get along with anybody?
Actually, even my own siblings would say, I told, at one point, I told my sister, if only the people would have seen me when I was young, maybe they would say that I would not have been successful because I was, as I said, I was playing with squatter
Yeah.
children. And then my sister said, but actually, no, because you were so different from us. And that made a
Mm,
difference
mm,
because unlike us, we were so afraid. You
mm,
you were you were so independent. You knew what exactly you wanted in life, and you had a goal. The direction is so clear from when you were young. So, as a matter of fact, when I was in women's has really at that point, women's was a place where children of politicians, affluent families went. And
mm,
so imagine somebody like me who didn't even have an allowance, you know, money for recess or something. My
mm,
parents would just give us the bread or sandwich as baon,
mm,
and I didn't have money, but it never really affected me that people were rich and I was poor. As a matter of fact, there was a time when I went to the cafeteria. I ordered noodles, and then when the cashier told me how much I was going to pay, I didn't have enough money for it. And
oh.
and if it were my sister,
Mm,
maybe it cost her so much embarrassment and everything like that. But because somehow I was a friend to everybody, I cannot forget that classmate of mine. She paid for it.
wow.
No,
All right.
I did not feel any embarrassment because they did not make me feel different from them.
Mm, mm,
And
mm,
and in the case of my sister who went to the same school, she had a hard time mingling with these people. Mine was not the same case as my sister because it never really affected me, which the difference in state of life.
mm,
I was able to blend well with even the rich. It did
mm,
not affect me at all.
mm. So what you're saying is, apart from independent thought, you're also saying there has to be clarity in your personal vision about what you want to be. Um, So in your case, what was the vision? So you were already in PWU. You were taking your law degree, and eventually you even became a professor of law. So what was the vision that began to gel for you? Because you knew you wanted to be a leader, but a leader of what? What kind of a leader? So tell us some more.
Okay, as I said, going back to high school at that time, when I came in second year, of course, I would say that somehow English was the first language for everybody.
Right.
Because coming
Mm,
from affluent families, they were talking in English. Mine was different because we were talking Tagalog because
mm,
I came from a parochial school. So I
mm,
would say that somehow English was sort of my weakness.
mm,
And I knew that this was something I had to develop.
mm,
And at the same time, when I was very popular in elementary and going to a school where on second year and there's already somebody who's a recognized leader and somebody who in fact came from a very a political family, a affluent family, and this thing, and who's actually excelling in class and who managed to be top in everything, like she was champion of that interpretative reading contest, extemporaneous speaking. This lady was actually somebody I wanted to be. I said I knew that, somehow compared to what she was at that time, I was really nothing. I had really a long way to go. So, what I did was from second year, I said, I have to beat this person someday. And that was it will take a long time, maybe second year, third year, fourth year. So fourth year was the time of reckoning. So I said, when the fourth year came, I did not run for any position in any organization. I only ran for the organization where she ran for president. It could have been the student council.
okay.
I could have run for student council,
Mm,
but I ran for the senior class organization because that was where she was going to run as president.
mm. So in other words, you're saying you felt a strong sense of competitiveness at that particular
Against
point in
that
your life.
person who was a
Yeah.
recognized leader. I would not
Oh,
run for anybody against, but to this particular person who I felt it was going to be a tough ride for me because I
mm,
knew there are a lot of things that I have to hurdle to beat
mm.
her.
Let's explore that a little bit. Um, you wanted to compete with her because you're saying the competition process would have sharpened you some more. Like, for example, it drove you to improve your communication skills, which apparently is also one of the keys to the making of a leader. One has to have good communication skills. And so, in other words, you're saying apart from your mom, this classmate that you were competing with was another big influence on you because it caused you to want to better yourself, to pit yourself against her. What was the outcome? How did that turn out? So you went up against her, and then what?
Okay, so in order to beat her, of course, I had to actually prepare for first of all, I had to learn how to speak good English.
Okay.
That was something already a tough thing for me. So in my free time, when I was at home, the moment I reached home, I would read a lot of books
Mm,
after doing household chores, because this was part of our routine. And after studying, I
mm,
would spend some time to read a lot of books. And because I knew that I wanted to reach that state that I could speak good English like her. And then I joined so many clubs and I joined as many contests as I could. Not
mm,
necessarily winning them, but at least honing. That's why I said you have to hone your skills. And this was
mm,
how I did, how I
mm,
did it. And
mm,
and so when I reached the scene, but as against her, I had an advantage because I was a friend to everybody.
there you go.
Because she was she was pampered. She was just like my mom, coming from a very affluent family, but different, of course, in the sense that she was an introverted type and she was aloof. She looked at everybody as a threat. She didn't want anybody to beat her. And,
Okay.
and unlike me, I capitalized on my strength
Mm.
because can I say that I am charismatic in the sense that I was, it was not very difficult for me to be a friend to everybody. So that
Mm.
was my advantage. So when
Mm.
that time came, I won in the election by 1 point.
Oh.
By one. And of
Okay.
course, because that sort of feeling was so euphoric because
Mm.
somehow, that victory already somehow gave an indication that somehow I accomplished, something really related to what I've been doing from the start.
Mm.
And so because she could not accept defeat, she said, no, there should be a recount. I cannot accept that one point difference. So
Okay.
but I allowed the recount.
Mm.
So and then she won by one.
Oh.
It's difficult because if there's just one margin, it's difficult really. There's a possibility that somehow they committed a mistake or something.
Mm.
So I allowed them to do a recount, and
Mm.
the second one she won by one. And
Oh.
so when they were just preparing to have another canvas, I said it's no longer necessary because I concede.
Ah.
You know what I
All
mean?
right.
Because
Yeah.
as far as I was concerned, I was already a winner.
There you go. I was about to say that. Yeah.
Earning the trust and confidence of my classmates
Mm.
was for me the true test of leadership, and
Mm.
winning against a lone opponent who happened to be a strong candidate was just a bonus.
Mm. I'd also like to point out for our viewers' benefit that Chito's experience shows you that victory can occur on many levels. One form of victory is the outright victory, which is becoming the leader that you run for. And the other form of victory is the internal victory, where you become the better for having competed. Whether you win or not, you've already won. And
Yeah.
so this is one powerful reason why, for those of you out there who are thinking about joining competitions or speech contests, please go for it because it makes you better than when you don't join. So take Chito as your inspiration. So Chito, so you had this experience of going up against somebody who I suppose initially you really admired, and then later on you wanted to prove something, right, to her and to yourself, and that was that the key ingredient is good human relations. So let's bring it back again.
Yes,
One
yes.
is independent thought. Second is clarity and vision in the making of a leader. Third is that you continually develop yourself, adding new skills. And fourth, based on your story, is that you have to have good human relations. So now, so far, we have four things that go into the making of a leader. So, Chito, this is getting even more fascinating now because later in life, you would become a civic leader. You would do many more things. So imagine joining HSBC, one of the biggest banks in the Philippines. So, from your college days to the time that you became a working professional, a working lawyer, did that desire to lead, to compete, still exist? Did it persist well into your professional life?
Okay, so you see, when I came into HSBC, I well, I joined the HSBC after coming from an exchange program.
Mm.
I was actually chosen to become the loan representative of the Philippines to an exchange program. This is my really my success at all stages of my life. I was able to prove my leadership, because
Mm.
in PWU, when I graduated, I was able to, well, I represented PWU and in a leadership seminar sponsored by the US Embassy, and we didn't know that we were being observed. And then all of a sudden I received a call from the US Embassy saying that I was chosen to be one of the nominees to this Asia Pacific leadership project to be held in the US, sponsored by the US Department of State. And so I had to go through, some, of course, like screening and all these things in the US Embassy. And I left as the lone delegate of the Philippines. Actually, it was, at the time when PWU, they were saying that PWU is for social parties or things like this. That was why it was really somehow frustrating for some of my relatives for me to go to PWU, because they felt that I am so intelligent. Why am I going to a school where social graces are the more important thing? They thought of me as really somebody who would be, for example, the central bank governor or something like that. And this thing that I was doing was totally different from what they were perceiving that I would become. But somehow I managed to always prove at certain levels in my career that somehow the decision, first of all, to give up the scholarship in Paco Catholic School, and then to go to women's, and then I gained scholarship too, because I didn't want also my parents to suffer from that decision. I managed to get scholarship in PWU, even up to college. And then I wanted to go to UP for my
Okay.
for my college,
Mm.
because for me medicine and these things, but my mom stopped me, and to my dismay, even my father reinforced that decision, because they felt that their priority was for us to finish college, and they because of this character of mine, this quality that I have exhibited since I was young, they thought that maybe I might not be able to finish college and probably go to the mountains, like Nelly and Sancho or that time. And they thought that I had that kind of that quality, that maybe I may not be able to finish college. So
Mm.
I was not happy about that thing, but then it did not stop me from still studying
Mm.
and going back. Maybe I said, maybe they were right. Maybe I would
Mm.
have gone to the mountains, and maybe I did not finish college, because there are certain qualities in me that I hated the system in that parochial school where I was not allowed to speak what I felt. Those things that I gave up everything. Those qualities are enough really to are indicative of this radical mind, and maybe as
Yeah.
my other siblings. So
Mm.
I went to women's, but somehow I managed to prove that even if I did not go to UP,
Mm.
I was actually chosen to represent the Philippines, besting other schools.
Mm.
So even that UP person did not get it, I got it. So
Mm.
regardless of where you go, no matter
Mm.
what school you are
Mm.
in, for as long as you have those qualities, you will still excel. And
Mm.
again, at that point, that at that point, really, it was something that I was very proud of, because I was able to prove that even if I didn't go to UP, I would still beat the person the people from UP, those things.
Mm.
And then came, of course, after the exchange program. That was why I managed to work in HSBC, because it's not easy to be in that British bank.
Yeah.
But and then during that time they were putting up I finished accounting, and of course, oh my God, I'm so excited. There are a lot of stories. I'm sure it will take one day to talk about it. But what I'm trying to say is that even in my stay in the US, I had the opportunity to study in the law school in San Diego, and even my foster parents made arrangements for me to work in Price Waterhouse.
Mm.
But again, Dino, I decided to come back to the Philippines
Mm.
because of my dream of building a nice house and a comfortable life for my mom. I
Mm.
knew that if I studied in the US and pursued all those things, I would never be able to help my mom immediately, because me,
Mm.
4 years of stay, for example, taking up law and maybe working at the same time, you know how expensive going to school on a half tuition basis, for example,
Mm.
it will not allow me to actually support my family. So that also, that great desire to put back my mom where she came from, to build the dream house, and then also to have a comfortable life, was something that made me go back to the Philippines and work in a foreign bank where I was given a nice salary.
Mm.
So when I joined HSBC, they were putting up a computer department, an EDP department,
Mm.
because that was the only time that they were starting computerization. At that point, there was no, it wasn't really something that was really in place. But of course, HSBC was always advanced. So they were putting up an EDP department. So I was one of those which was considered to become part of it,
Mm.
pioneer in the HSBC. And we were given, of course, we were treated as confidential, not rank and file. We had allowances and everything. So, and at that time, I took the challenge because we were also on flexible time, which allowed me to go to law school,
Mm.
because it was impossible to take up law while working. So I took that job because I could go to law school. And
Mm.
the only reason why I took up law as an alternative, because my parents wouldn't support, of course, and we could not afford to go to take up medicine. But I
Mm.
wanted to do something else at par with medicine. So I took up law because I knew that I could actually support myself to take up law, because it was something.
Mm.
It was another option. So I took up law while working for HSBC. And while I was in EDP, they approached me that at that time the union, the registration of the union was going to be canceled. So they approached, those union leaders approached me and said, we need your help. I was a law
Mm.
student at that time, and I was enjoying that flex time and everything. And because of this, we have, our union registration was canceled, and we know you can help us. You know what I
Mm.
did? I I I stepped out of EDP, gave up those
Okay.
allowances and those high salaries to join the union and the rank and file again. And
Mm.
again, my parents, the concept of success in a corporation for my parents are being the CEO. And
Mm.
becoming a union leader was something far from their mind. And
Mm.
again, this was a bold move on my part. But I said
Mm.
I was going to be a lawyer. Who cares if I'm going to spearhead the labor movement in the banking industry? I will be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So and
Mm.
actually became a very good lawyer in the banking industry, because I gave my rank and file CBA, increases in salary for 50% for the first year, 5% for the second, and 5% for the third. And my second negotiation was 90% across the board. So
Wow.
each time, it was really a record-breaking thing in the banking industry.
Mm.
To the point that they actually offered me a promotion, from the rank and file, and I turned down 3 promotions to
Mm. Mm.
become the leader, the
Yeah.
union leader. And
Yeah.
but I could, so many things about, because planning and everything, we resorted to bizarre protest actions and everything. The tellers were coming, reporting for work in dusters, and then my because they recognized me as their leader, and they said, what else can we do? My God,
Mm.
you are a lady, and what as men, what can we do to help you? And so some of
Mm.
them shaved their heads. So and this really affected, of course, how British are, they're prim and proper, and these things affected them, the bizarre, protest action. So it
Yeah.
went to headlines. The Reuters were interviewing me and
Mhm.
everything like that. And so so when they asked for intervention from the labor,
Mm.
the labor said we cannot assume jurisdiction because they did not file their notice of strike. Because I
Mm.
knew, because as a law student at the time, I knew what I was doing. So
Mm.
those things happened under my leadership. So I
Yeah.
said correct planning. It
Mm.
it was always there in my blood. I mean, that was why I said
Mm.
the 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 result of the scientific studies will need it. You are born, and at the same time, you have to learn it. You have to learn every hone your skills, because
Mm.
that happened to me.
So, Chito, if I may extract two new lessons that became abundantly clear to me based on your story, is that in the making of a leader, two new qualities we add to our existing list of five. One is it appears that you need to believe in yourself. You cannot sell yourself short in terms of what you think you can or cannot do. In other words, you saw no limits to what was possible for you, whether it was upward or whether it was horizontal. In other words, broadening your base of friends and people that you cared for. And then the second lesson I extracted from what you shared is that another way of making somebody become a leader is to be able to go beyond themselves. Because first, you did it for your mom. That's why you came back to the Philippines to be able to buy a home for her. And then you did it out of a sense of justice, out of concern for the majority of the talents in the bank. And so you became a labor leader. Imagine that. So I know that this must have also involved things like certification elections, making sure that they didn't get infiltrated. And there must have been some cases where you really wanted to fight for this person, but they had already given up, so that kind of frustrated you. Or sometimes, in some cases, they bring up matters to you that apparently could be solved so quickly, but it became unnecessarily complicated. And yet, because of your determination to learn, you not only became a leader, you became a discerning leader as well. So, to continue your story, I'm now curious, Englishmen being the way they are, how did the British principals or stakeholders of the company react to to all of the movements that you were creating or sustaining in the bank?
Because unlike I think that this you can still call this responsible leadership, because in
Mm.
every move that I made, it I didn't do it just to make things hard for them. Like, for example, when you were doing the collective bargaining agreement, when we demanded, we base it on facts, like the books, or whether
Mm.
HSBC was actually earning at the time. It wasn't like we were demanding something that HSBC could not afford. And
Mm.
the main cry, what we were fighting for, was that Philippines, being a part of the whole HSBC, was actually not getting the same salary as to our counterparts in Malaysia, in Hong Kong. So, those things are products of thorough planning. It's not like some because some become union presidents because they just want to be promoted.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a known fact. But in my case, I gave up promotions,
Mm.
and that was why I was so credible. In
Mm.
fact, there was, you're talking about this thing about getting infiltrated. It reached the point already that I became a legal counsel of the entire banking industry,
Okay.
and I became afraid, because for
Mm.
the very reason why what you were saying, it was getting infiltrated already.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
that was at that point when I felt, oh, it's not worth. I mean, and then when I went back to my members, I said, it's time for me. I gave you 2 good negotiations. I hope you will not mind this time if I think about my career.
Yeah.
Because it's not like as if, there are union officers when they leave, it will be interpreted as, oh, she sold us, she became an officer only because of her but in my case, no, because I
Mm,
gave them 2 good bargaining agreements. they
mm,
they allowed me to, but at this point I don't know if my decisions were right. I did not accept when they were promoting me. They wanted me to become assistant vice president from rank and file of the human resources department.
mm.
Because obviously they wanted already me out of the union. And then no, I did not allow that. You know what I did? I went to exports department as assistant manager.
Mm,
I don't know, it can sound crazy because at that point I was so powerful and I could have actually demanded for so much, but I didn't want
mm,
any strings attached to my promotion.
mm.
I could have done it.
So what you're saying is that the making of a good leader as well is for a person to be able to stand on principle. In other
Yes.
words, to be branded as somebody who walks their talk and has something that they stand for. In other words, they're not going to be waffling left and right. But let me add one more insight that I just gained from you. It's wonderful in its simplicity. The fact that you sat eventually on both sides of the negotiating table, first as legal counsel for the talents or the labor, and then later on as a manager. This gave you the unique ability to see things from different perspectives. So here's another quality in the making of a leader, as Chito has shared with us, which is to be a great leader, you also need to be able to see all sides. In other words, you can't just see one side of things, to be biased over something. And yet, while you're able to see all sides, to not lose who you are. And that's why holding on to your principles is also important. So far, I'm learning a lot from you, Chito. It's magnificent to listen to your life story. So moving forward, so now you've become one of the key leaders in the banking industry, and as you said, other banks were turning to you for counsel, for advice. um, what direction did your life take after that?
Okay. And so, well, Iloilo was also closing at the time, and so in a way, in that part of my life when I was union president, when Iloilo was closing its branch there, I managed also to get good salary. How do you call it? The separation pay was so good that somehow, in a way, the respect was always there because even if HSBC was, I was on the other side of the fence. HSBC management told me when they were promoting me, said that if you were good on the union side, you could also be good on the management side.
Oh yeah.
So that respect I gained from both sides. I mean,
Mm,
and I was somehow I said maybe I was doing things right because, in fact, there was a time when there was a position open for the training department in the group head office, and they also approached me if I would want to join as a trainer
mm,
in the training department. That was really something that I wanted to do too, because in a way, going to different countries was something I've also wanted to do. And again, as I said, my weakness at that time was public speaking and extemporaneous speaking, and somehow I've attained that because I could be, I would be able to do training for even the British in other countries. Somehow
mm,
I felt that anywhere I go, in any stage of my life, I was very consistent with what I wanted to achieve. In
Mhm.
fact, recently I was featured in Manila Times. The title was "The Tireless Achiever."
Okay.
Because even at this point, you'll be surprised. I'm now 69, turning on 70,
Mhm.
but I still continue to achieve things because in every opportunity open to me, and I always make sure that I'm able to grab whatever will be beneficial for my family. And as a matter of fact, I took care of my parents, even my grandmother. I took over the responsibility of taking care for up to the time that they died.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
So let me just tie off a knot, or tie up a loose end that I'm sure our viewers are dying to ask. Was your dream of building a home for your mom fulfilled? Were you able to realize that particular desire that you had?
in a way, that becoming a union president paved the way for the realization of that dream,
Hmm.
because one of the demands was really to provide a better housing loan program for the employees.
There
And
you go.
and at that time you could hardly borrow enough to be able
Mhm.
to build a decent house, because like the monthly amortization would be based on a 15-year repayment period. I
Okay.
made it. We worked hard to to extend this repayment period to 25 years.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you can just imagine that if I was only entitled to get at that time for 100,000, I was able to get, for example, 500,000, enough to be able to build the house
Mm.
that I was thinking of for my mom.
Mm.
So if not for being a union president and a very good at that,
Mm.
I would not even have been able to fight for it. So the first thing that, it was so funny, because at that time because every time that we negotiated, we would already say, okay, this is approved, and then the management would already put it in place, not even wait for the signing of everything. So at the time when that was approved, would you believe that all my colleagues in the bank already applied for it? And because I was busy working on the negotiation, I became number nine.
All right.
I was ninth in the queue, and
Mm.
so it was just that good that when when I was going to apply already, one person said, "No, I'm giving up my number one slot to you."
Wow.
I managed to be, but what I'm saying is that I would say it wasn't something that I thought of when I became union president, because my main intention was really just to save the union
Mm.
and to come up
Mm.
with a union. But
Mm.
because I was very, in fact, the negotiation at the time for HSBC, I was just so strong a leader that the negotiation involved the people from Hong Kong, from the head office. We were negotiating by you know with the Hong Kong people already. The
Mm.
the the, the board of in Hong Kong. It was that, and they were in constant touch with the people there. Our CEO from here would call them up while we were negotiating.
Mm.
That was how strong it was. But again, we were asking how it ended. This thing about labor thing in my blood. It ended when I decided to marry and gave birth to a son, and I felt that at that point in my life, my priority should be my own family,
Mm.
because I always felt that I could not consider myself as a success if I'm a failure at home.
That's right. So this leads to the question, um, Chito, was there ever a downside to being driven to to being so passionate about your vision, your dreams. Were there moments where you experienced some pangs of regret, for example, or were there things that you would have done differently?
Well, it will always be at the back of my mind when, when, let's say, for example, the thing about the scholarship in 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 the US,
Mm.
because I could have been a lawyer there,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
then I could have been, because mine was accounting and law, and so I
Mm.
could have been, you know, Price Waterhouse at that time was willing
Mm.
to take me in, and
Mm.
and I gave it up, in those days. So at the back of my mind, I would say, and then when I got married, the first thing was my husband would want us to settle in the US,
Mm.
even if we did not have the papers yet, and
Mm.
I wasn't willing to give it up. I mean, my
Mm.
career in here in the Philippines, and then with no papers, when I could have been a lawyer and somebody, in the US at that time, which I gave up. And so, and going back to another question, that something regret and everything, or any stumbling blocks along the way, I thought everything I planned already.
Mm.
I planned very well, because
Mm.
I'm not the person who will not plan anything in my whole life.
Mm.
But there's something that you cannot plan.
Mm.
God gave me, for my second child, an autistic child.
Mm.
And that changed everything. And that was why, at that point, I was at the peak of my career. I could have been Secretary of Labor. I could have been, I could have been a vice mayor. I could have been anybody.
Yeah.
But for 17 years, because when he was diagnosed with autism,
Mm.
and the developmental doctor said that he will not be able to talk, and then he could nonverbal,
Mm.
and these things. I learned to appreciate smaller things. You'll be surprised, because for 4 years, I said to myself, I will not give up on my son. So I will prove everybody wrong. So that kind of passion in my work, and I I would always apply it to my own family. I will not give up on my son. So 4 years he was not able, but I went to a series of therapy, bumped into this group of therapists adapting Lova's method.
Mm.
And for 4 years, we had them available at home
Mm.
so that my son can just speak. You will be surprised that at that point, when my son, I was driving, and then I kept on saying, Anton, trees, 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 trees. And then I would bring along all my nephews, so that, because one greatest thing is that an autistic child lacks socialization.
Mm.
So whenever I went to Green Hills, for example, for weekends, I would make sure that I bring along my nephews too with us. So
Mm.
by the time that we are on our way home, they're so tired, they're sleeping. And then at one point we were passing through, for example, the Forbes Park, and McKinley Road. And
Mm.
and then I was saying, Anton, trees, 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 trees. And all of a sudden, for the first time, he uttered a word. He said trees. And I didn't.
Wow.
I woke up everybody in the car. I said, "Hey, Anton can speak trees, trees." And if anybody could have heard me, he would say, "I'm crazy," because that was the first time my son uttered a word. And
Mm.
somehow again, I've proven again one thing in my life, that sheer determination and hard work and belief in yourself will always yield to success.
Mm.
So, and then now my son is still with me, and he's self-reliant. And, you know, I would say that I've also succeeded in that respect.
Mm. So the presumption is that he's able to communicate a little bit better now. In other words, having more words in his vocabulary somehow.
Yes, and at the same time, because we did not stay in the US and everything like that, and the father is now a US citizen. So when I researched and I found out there's this Child Citizenship Act of 2000 that if you have, you know, a, if a child is under 18 years of age and a child of an American citizen, either parent, and with that, what's this? The when he was petitioned, he became an immigrant. Yeah, that immigrant paper, he automatically becomes a U.S. citizen. So
Outstanding.
with that thing, I managed to work it out again because at first I did not. You see, my husband actually we got divorced, and when my husband when he wanted to petition for my children, I didn't want them to be petitioned at that time because I didn't want my special child to be living with a stepmother, because of course it will break my heart for somebody else taking care of my special child. And so I did a research, and so I saw this Child Citizenship Act of 2000 that means that if he becomes immigrant, I will not have to wait for 5 years for him to join me. So what I did was, the moment that I saw and I researched on that and I learned about everything about it, I immediately arranged for our trip there, and using all those things, both my sons became U.S. citizens.
Wow.
And now
What an achievement.
my special child is entitled to pension for the rest of his life.
And not only that, one would presume that in the US, they would have a lot of exceptionally good therapists, people who can further his growth, his development.
But
As
he stayed here.
Oh, he's with you.
He stayed here because I felt, because the thing about, people would always say that they have the best treatment in the US. But one thing that they lack there is the family support and love.
True enough.
And they will turn into robots. They can do everything. They will probably be able to work in McDonald's and earn, but they will not even consider me as their mother because they would not know anymore the meaning of love and motherhood. So the thing that I know I have achieved was that my son is capable of emotions. He knows what love is. He kisses me. He tells me, "I love you, Mama." And when, for example, I'm hurt, and then he will embrace me, "Mama, I love you." So that was something that US cannot give me.
That's right.
Support, not even the therapy and everything. So that made a lot of difference.
One more thing that I think we can safely add to the making of a leader based on your life is that great leadership will require more than just IQ. It will also require EQ, which you are able to demonstrate in incredible servings, because first you had the empathy for your mother, then empathy for your co-workers in HSBC, and today this special link, this special bond and empathy with your son, which you were able to pass on to him because, as you said, he would hug you and he would express his love for you. And I think, as a parent myself, that is its own unique reward that is worth more than anything, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about it is that my first son, well, I have two sons, and the second one was the one who happened to be a special child. So my son was saying, my elder son was saying, "Ma, aren't you happy that I'm not the autistic person because I can take care of Anton?" You see, when you inculcate in them this value, somehow you'll get it 100-fold. And I've seen it to my elder son because he saw it in me. He is, a big brother to my son. And now I'm telling you, he's not gotten married yet because maybe, in fact, when they were both growing up, I was afraid that I might be giving special attention to my special child. And so I made him take a psychological test, my first boy, because one time when there was something, as he said, he was trying to take care of me as a young
Mm.
child, 7 years old. He would say, "Ma, don't leave the house. I'll accompany you." Something like that. So,
Okay.
so I would be afraid about not being able to give them the right, treatment or something. So I
Ah.
subjected him
Mm.
to a psychological test. My elder son, and
Mm.
of course he doesn't know about this because but this thing
Yeah.
will already. Anyway, he's 37 now, and he said, uh, what was this when the result of the psychological test showed that he assumed the role of a caretaker.
Mm. In other words, what you're saying is you were concerned that he might skip childhood altogether and grow up too soon,
Yes,
missing the best and most enjoyable years of his life. Mm. Again, that capacity, that ability to empathize with your son is a wonderful quality for a leader to have. If you cannot take care of your own family, you cannot take care of a larger family, say it like an organization. So, whether it's macro or micro, another key factor perhaps that Chito may agree with is consistency. In other words, being a good leader doesn't just mean being a good leader in an organization. Being a good leader could also mean being a good one at home. So,
right.
Chito, if you could share some parting words for maybe young ladies out there who are wondering how can we make a mark on this planet, on this world, a legacy that people can remember us by, because you have so many life lessons that you just shared with us. But one among those probably stands out more than any. For you, what would that be?
Well, first of all, I've been able to prove that there's no limit to what one can achieve
Mhm,
as long as there's hard work and determination.
mhm.
And of course, I've always, as I said, I've always said that I cannot consider myself as a success if I'm a failure at home. So those things are so important, and of course, the faith in God. That's the most important thing.
Agreed. So, on behalf of our listeners here in the Leader's Edge, our viewers, I'd like to ask Chito, if people want to consult with you or to write to you or maybe even ask for advice about, say, maybe some of them watching us right now have special children of their own. How do they reach you? How do they find you? Are you, for instance, on FB?
Well, yes, I am in FB, Rosario Calixto Chavez,
Okay.
and then Chito, close. Yeah.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to reach out to Chito, um, she's very approachable. She won't bite. She's a very big-hearted person with this great love, not just for herself, but for others in need. So, at this point, I'd like to thank you so much, Chito. Thank you for taking time out. I know you're an incredibly busy person uh, to be a guest on our show. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to share this. And I
Mhm.
hope I've inspired a lot of people through my leadership story.
Well, you certainly inspired me. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, just remember that if you liked what you've heard today, it would be magnificent if you could click the like, share, and subscribe button. And to also remember that coming up on season 9, episode 9, is none other than Conrad Pereras, who will be talking about building a well nation, which means living a life that matters. And so, as ever, we end by saying that learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas. Good day.